The soft glow of crystal chandeliers cast elegant shadows across LeBlanc, Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant. Jackson Montero adjusted his Patek Philippe watch, a recent indulgence that had barely made a dent in his considerable fortune. At 42, he had mastered the art of appearing effortlessly wealthy, from his tailored Tom Ford suit to his carefully cultivated air of indifference. The 82 Bordeaux is divine, don't you think? Rebecca Chen, his girlfriend of 3 months, held her wine glass with practiced precision. Her sleek black dress and diamond earrings perfectly complemented the restaurant's refined atmosphere. Jackson nodded absently, his attention drawn to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. The city lights sparkled like the diamonds adorning Rebecca's neck, beautiful, cold, and ultimately meaningless. "It's adequate," he replied, though he hadn't really tasted it. The evening had started like countless others in his post-divorce life. Exclusive reservations, impressive wine selections, and conversation that skimmed the surface of genuine connection. Rebecca was discussing her latest corporate merger, exactly the kind of woman he thought he should be with now. Ambitious, polished, uncomplicated. "Mr. Montero?" A familiar voice sliced through his thoughts like a blade through silk. Time seemed to stop. The crystal glasses, the murmur of wealthy patrons, the gentle clink of expensive silverware. Everything faded into background noise as Jackson turned toward that voice. His carefully constructed world tilted on its axis. Amelia stood there, wearing the restaurant's standard black uniform, her hair pulled back in a simple bun. But it was her swollen belly, clearly visible beneath her apron, that caught his breath in his throat. She was pregnant, very pregnant, and carrying a heavy tray of appetizers with practiced care. "Your appetizers," she said professionally, though Jackson noticed the slight tremor in her hands as she set down their plates. Her wedding ring was conspicuously absent, the pale band of skin where it once sat now a silent reminder of their shared past. Rebecca raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. "Do you know our server?" Before Jackson could respond, Amelia answered with remarkable composure. "I used to work for Mr. Montero's company." The lie slid smoothly from her lips, protecting them both from an uncomfortable explanation. Jackson watched as she moved away from their table, her steps measured and careful. The sight of her navigating between tables, carrying heavy trays while clearly in her third trimester, created a physical ache in his chest. "She seems rather common," Rebecca commented, sampling her foie gras with delicate precision. The word common echoed in Jackson's mind, triggering a flood of memories. Amelia, laughing as they shared pizza on their apartment floor before he'd made his first million. Amelia, crying when he missed their anniversary for a business deal. Amelia, packing her bags 2 years ago, saying she couldn't compete with his ambition anymore. "Excuse me," Jackson said abruptly, standing up. Rebecca's surprised expression barely registered as he made his way to the restaurant's kitchen entrance. He caught Amelia as she emerged from the swinging doors, empty tray in hand. "Why are you working here?" he asked, his voice low and intense. "This isn't the time, Jackson." She tried to move past him, but he gently caught her elbow. "You're pregnant, Amelia. You shouldn't be carrying heavy trays." Her green eyes flashed with familiar defiance. "I shouldn't be a lot of things, but here we are. I need this job." "But your family disowned me." She cut him off. "Turns out they were more disappointed in my pregnancy than our divorce." A bitter smile crossed her face. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have tables to serve." Jackson watched her walk away, noticing how other patrons barely glanced at her, just another invisible server in their world of privilege, the world he'd chosen over her. Returning to his table, he found Rebecca engrossed in a business call. She covered the phone's microphone. "Sorry, darling. Beijing needs me to weigh in on this deal. You don't mind, do you?" He shook his head, grateful for the reprieve from conversation. His appetite had vanished, replaced by a gnawing sensation that felt suspiciously like guilt. Through the evening, his eyes kept tracking Amelia's movements, noting her subtle winces when lifting heavy plates, the way she pressed a hand against her lower back during brief moments of rest. The Jackson who had divorced her 2 years ago would have finished his dinner, left a generous tip, and convinced himself it wasn't his problem anymore. But watching her now, he realized with startling clarity that he wasn't that man anymore, or perhaps, more accurately, he didn't want to be that man anymore. As the evening wound down, Rebecca excused herself to the ladies' room. leaving Jackson alone with his thoughts and the remainder of the expensive wine that had lost all appeal. He pulled out his phone, opened his banking app, and stared at the numbers that had once seemed to justify every choice he'd made. The Maître d' appeared at his elbow with the check presenter. "I hope everything was to your satisfaction, Mr. Montero." Jackson signed the bill, adding a tip that made even him pause. "The service was excellent," he said quietly, "particularly from Amelia." The Maître d' nodded professionally, though Jackson caught a flicker of concern in his eyes. "She's one of our newest staff members. Very dedicated. When does her shift end?" "Sir, I'm not at liberty to—" Jackson slid across his business card. "Please. It's important." The Maître d' hesitated before responding. "The restaurant closes at 11. Rebecca returned, gathering her Hermes bag. "Shall we go? I have an early meeting tomorrow." Jackson stood, helping her with her coat. "Actually, there's something I need to handle here. I'll have my driver take you home." Her perfectly maintained smile faltered slightly. "Is everything all right?" "No," he answered honestly, "but I'm hoping it will be." After Rebecca left, Jackson settled into the restaurant's bar, ordering water instead of his usual scotch. He watched as the dining room slowly emptied, as servers began their closing duties, as Amelia continued to work despite her visible exhaustion. At 11:15 p.m., she emerged from the employee entrance, wrapped in a worn wool coat that barely closed over her belly. Jackson stepped out of the shadows of the building. "We need to talk, Amelia." She stopped, shoulders tensing. "About what, Jackson? About how you've clearly moved up in the world? About how your girlfriend's jewelry probably costs more than I make in a year? Or about how you're still trying to control everything?" "About how I was wrong," he said simply. "About everything that matters." The street was quiet, except for the distant sound of traffic and the gentle whisper of snow beginning to fall. Amelia's breath formed small clouds in the cold air as she considered his words. "I have a bus to catch," she finally said. "Let me drive you home. Please. It's snowing, and you shouldn't be waiting at a bus stop in your condition." She laughed. But it wasn't the warm sound he remembered. "My condition. That's rich, coming from you. You know what? Fine. Give me a ride. But only because my feet are killing me and I'm too tired to argue." As they walked toward his waiting car, Jackson felt the weight of all their unspoken words, all their shared history, and all the mistakes he needed to make right. The snow continued to fall, covering the city in a clean white blanket, as if offering them both a fresh start. The interior of Jackson's Mercedes S-Class felt suffocating, despite its spacious cabin. Amelia sat as close to the passenger door as possible, her hand protectively cradling her swollen belly. The leather seats that usually whispered luxury now seemed to mock the growing tension between them. "You live in Queens now?" Jackson asked, breaking the uncomfortable silence as they crossed the Queensboro Bridge. "Woodside," Amelia replied, keeping her gaze fixed on the passing city lights. Not exactly the Upper East Side, but it's home. The contrast wasn't lost on Jackson. 2 years ago, they had shared a penthouse overlooking Central Park. Now she was living in a working-class neighborhood while he continued ascending the social ladder. The realization sat heavily in his chest. "How far along are you?" he ventured, stealing glances at her profile in the dim light. 7 months. Her answer was clipped, but then she added softly, "It's a boy." The car slowed at a red light, and Jackson gripped the steering wheel tighter. A boy. The kind of news that should be celebrated with joy, not discussed in this strained atmosphere of regret and unspoken accusations. "The father," he started, then stopped, unsure if he had the right to ask. "Left." Amelia's laugh was hollow. "Turns out not everyone is excited about unexpected pregnancies. He made his choice clear 3 months ago." Jackson's jaw clenched. "Does he know where you are? That you're working on your feet all night? He doesn't get to know anything about my life anymore." She turned to face him fully for the first time since entering the car. "Just like you don't." The words stung, but Jackson knew he deserved them. Turn right here," Amelia directed, pointing to a street lined with modest apartment buildings. He pulled up in front of a 5-story walk-up. The neighborhood wasn't dangerous, but it was a far cry from what she deserved. Christmas lights hung in various windows, their cheerful glow at odds with the peeling paint and worn steps. "This is me," Amelia said, reaching for the door handle. "Wait." Jackson's voice was urgent. "And let me help you up the stairs at least. I've been managing just fine on my own." Please, Amelia. It's icy, and those steps look treacherous. She hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Jackson quickly circled the car to help her out, noting how she tried to hide her grimace as she stood. The evening's work had clearly taken its toll. They climbed the stairs slowly, Amelia's breath becoming labored by the third floor. Jackson resisted the urge to carry her, knowing she would refuse. When they reached the fourth floor, she stopped outside apartment 4C. Well, this has been sufficiently awkward, she said, fishing for her keys. Thanks for the ride. How did you end up at LeBlanc? The question burst from him before she could escape inside. Amelia's shoulders slumped slightly. Would you believe me if I said it was the only place that would hire a visibly pregnant woman? The tips are good, and they offer health insurance after 3 months. You could have called me. Called you. Her voice rose slightly. What would I have said, Jackson? Hey, remember me? Your ex-wife. I'm pregnant with another man's child and need help. Is that what you wanted to hear? Yes. His response echoed in the narrow hallway. Yes, that's exactly what you should have done. Instead, I had to find out by watching you struggle with heavy trays and high heels. Don't pretend to care now, she whispered fiercely. You made your choice 2 years ago. Your precious empire was more important than our marriage, than the family we talked about having. You don't get to play concerned ex-husband now. A door opened down the hall, and an elderly woman peered out curiously. Amelia quickly unlocked her door, but Jackson followed her inside before she could close it. The apartment was small but meticulously clean. A tiny Christmas tree sat in the corner, its lights reflecting off the window that overlooked the elevated train tracks. A collection of baby items was carefully arranged in one corner, all clearly secondhand but chosen with care. You shouldn't be here, Amelia said, removing her coat to reveal her uniform still spotted with the evening's work. I shouldn't be a lot of things. Jackson echoed her earlier words, but here we are. He watched as she moved to the kitchen area, filling a glass with water. Her hands were shaking slightly, and without thinking, he crossed the room to steady them. Let me help you, Amelia. Not because I pity you, but because I owe you. Because seeing you tonight made me realize how badly I screwed up everything that mattered. You can't fix this with money, Jackson. You can't write a check and make everything better. I know that, but I can make sure you don't have to work yourself to exhaustion. I can make sure you have proper medical care, that you're eating well, that what? She interrupted. That I become another charity case for you to feel good about. Another problem you can solve with your millions. No, he said firmly, that you and your son have the support you deserve. Not because I'm trying to buy forgiveness, but because it's the right thing to do. Amelia sank into one of the kitchen chairs, suddenly looking exhausted. I don't know if I can trust you again, Jackson. You broke something in me when you chose your ambition over our marriage. I'm not asking for trust right now, he said quietly, kneeling beside her chair. I'm asking for a chance to prove I've changed, to show you that I finally understand what matters. She looked at him for a long moment, her green eyes searching his face for sincerity. Finally, she spoke. I have a doctor's appointment tomorrow at 2 p.m. If you really want to help, you can start by driving me there. My bus route takes over an hour. I'll be here at 1:30, he promised immediately. As he stood to leave, Amelia called out, What about your girlfriend? The one in the designer dress. Jackson paused at the door. Rebecca isn't my concern right now. You are. Walking back to his car, Jackson pulled out his phone and began making calls. By morning, he had rescheduled 3 major meetings and cleared his afternoon schedule. For the first time in years, business would have to wait. The snow had stopped, leaving the city in pristine white. As Jackson drove home, he realized that seeing Amelia again hadn't just stirred old feelings. It had awakened something he thought he'd buried under years of ambition and success. His conscience. Tomorrow would be the first step in a long journey of redemption. Whether Amelia would eventually trust him again remained to be seen. But one thing was certain. He wouldn't fail her this time. Not when she needed him most, even if she wouldn't admit it. At precisely 1:25 p.m., Jackson parked his Mercedes outside Amelia's apartment building. He'd deliberately chosen his least ostentatious vehicle, a charcoal gray E-Class instead of his usual S-Class, and dressed down in dark jeans and a cashmere sweater rather than his typical business attire. His phone buzzed incessantly with messages from Rebecca, who was still upset about his abrupt departure the previous night. He silenced it without responding. The corporate world that had consumed his life for so long could wait. Amelia emerged from the building at 1:28 p.m., wearing a navy maternity dress that had seen better days. Her hair was loose today, falling in natural waves past her shoulders, the way she used to wear it when they were married. The sight made his chest tighten. "You're early," she said, carefully navigating the icy steps. Jackson rushed to help her, offering his arm for support. To his surprise, she accepted it. Traffic was lighter than expected. The drive to the medical center in Forest Hills was quiet, but less tense than the previous night. Amelia stared out the window, occasionally rubbing her belly in small circles, a gesture so maternal it made Jackson's throat constrict. "And does he move a lot?" he asked softly. A small smile touched her lips. "All the time, especially at night when I'm trying to sleep. He's going to be a handful, like his mother," Jackson said before he could stop himself. The comment hung in the air, heavy with memories of their own late-night conversations, dreams of the family they'd planned to have. Amelia's smile faded. At the medical center, Jackson was surprised when Amelia didn't object to him accompanying her inside. The waiting room was crowded with expectant mothers, some with partners, others alone. They found 2 empty seats in the corner. "Amelia Martinez?" a nurse called after 20 minutes. Jackson started to rise, but Amelia hesitated. "You don't have to come in." "I want to," he said firmly. "Unless you'd rather I didn't." She studied his face for a moment, then nodded. "Okay." The examination room was small but well-equipped. Dr. Patricia Wilson, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair, greeted them warmly. "Amelia, good to see you. And this is Jackson," Amelia supplied. "He's a friend." The word friend felt like a knife twist, but Jackson forced a smile. "Nice to meet you, Doctor." "Doctor?" Wilson reviewed Amelia's chart, her expression growing concerned. "Your blood pressure is higher than I'd like, Amelia, and you've only gained 2 pounds since your last visit. Are you still working those long shifts?" Before Amelia could respond, Jackson interjected, "She won't be anymore. I'm making sure of that." Both women turned to look at him, Amelia with surprise, Dr. Wilson with approval. "Good," the doctor said. "Because at this stage, with your numbers, I'm recommending reduced activity and better rest. The baby's development is slightly behind where we'd like to see it." Jackson watched the color drain from Amelia's face. "Is something wrong with him?" "Nothing serious yet," Dr. Wilson assured her. "But you need to take better care of yourself. More rest, better nutrition, and definitely no more long hours on your feet. Let's take a look at the little one, shall we?" As the ultrasound image appeared on the screen, Jackson found himself moving closer to Amelia's side. The grainy black and white picture showed a perfectly formed profile, a tiny nose, a curved forehead, a hand raised as if waving. "There's your boy," Dr. Wilson smiled. "Everything looks good structurally. Strong heartbeat." The rapid whooshing sound filled the room, and Jackson saw tears forming in Amelia's eyes. Without thinking, he reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. After the appointment, they sat in the car in silence, the ultrasound pictures clutched in Amelia's hands. "You can't quit your job," Jackson finally said. "I know that, but you can't keep working those hours either." "I don't have a choice," she whispered. "The medical bills." "Let me help," he interrupted. "Not as your ex-husband, not as some kind of savior, but as someone who cares about you and that baby. Jackson, I have a proposition," he continued. "My company owns several residential buildings in Queens. There's a vacant 2-bedroom apartment in Astoria, in a Dorman building. It's yours if you want it. No rent, no strings attached." Amelia's head snapped up. "Absolutely not. Just listen. The apartment comes with the building manager position. Part-time, desk work only. You'd handle tenant requests, coordinate with maintenance, basic administrative duties. It's a real job with a real salary, health benefits, and most importantly, no heavy lifting or late nights." "Why are you doing this?" Jackson turned to face her fully. "Because I've spent 2 years trying to fill a void with meaningless relationships and bigger deals. Because seeing you last night made me realize how empty my life has become. Because that little boy deserves a better start than what you can give him working 60 hours a week at LeBlanc." Tears spilled onto Amelia's cheeks. "I can't depend on you again, Jackson. It nearly broke me last time." "Then don't depend on me. Depend on yourself. The job is yours because you're qualified for it. The apartment comes with the position, it always has. I'm just making you aware of the opportunity." She wiped her eyes, looking down at the ultrasound photos. I need time to think about it. Of course. He started the car. But promise me one thing. Don't go back to LeBlanc tonight. Take 24 hours to rest to consider the offer. I'll cover any lost wages. Jackson. Please, Amelia. For him. He nodded toward her belly. She was quiet for a long moment before responding. One day. That's all I'm promising. As they drove back to her apartment, Jackson felt something shift between them. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but perhaps the first fragile bridge across the chasm they'd created 2 years ago. Helping her up the stairs one last time, he handed her his business card. My personal number is on the back. Call me, for anything. Amelia took the card, her fingers brushing his. Thank you for coming today. Thank you for letting me. Walking back to his car, Jackson pulled out his phone and finally read Rebecca's messages. The last one was clear. We need to talk about last night. Yes, he typed back. We do. It was time to start dismantling the carefully constructed facade of his life, piece by piece. The first step would be ending things with Rebecca. The rest, well, the rest would depend on whether Amelia could learn to trust him again, not as the man he had been, but as the man he was finally ready to become. The following morning, Jackson sat in his corner office on the 45th floor of the Montero Investment Group building, staring at the skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. The morning sun glinted off neighboring skyscrapers, creating a golden cage of glass and steel that suddenly felt suffocating. His secretary's voice crackled through the intercom. Mr. Montero, Miss Chen is here to see you. Send her in, Carol. He stood, straightening his tie. Rebecca entered, impeccable as always in a white Chanel suit. Her Louboutin heels clicked authoritatively across the marble floor. You've been avoiding my calls. I've been busy, Jackson replied, gesturing for her to sit. She remained standing. Busy? Her perfectly manicured nails drummed against her leather portfolio. Would this busyness have anything to do with your ex-wife serving our appetizers? Jackson met her gaze steadily. Yes. The directness of his answer seemed to throw her off balance. I see. She placed her portfolio on his desk with precise movements. And I suppose that's why you left me at the restaurant. Rebecca, Jackson began. I think we both know this isn't working. Because of her? Rebecca's voice took on a sharp edge. A pregnant waitress? Really? Jackson? No, he said quietly. Because of me. Because I've been living a life that looks perfect on paper but feels hollow inside. You deserve someone who can give you what you want. What I want? She laughed bitterly. What I want is standing right in front of me. You're one of the most successful investors in New York. We make sense together. Do we? Jackson moved around his desk. Or do we just look good in society photos? Rebecca's composure cracked slightly. Don't do this, Jackson. We can work through whatever crisis you're having. It's not a crisis. It's clarity. He softened his tone. You're an remarkable woman, Rebecca. But we're both playing parts in a story that isn't real. She stared at him for a long moment before picking up her portfolio. You'll regret this. When she breaks your heart again, don't come looking for me. The door closed behind her with a soft click, far gentler than the storm he'd expected. Jackson loosened his tie and pressed the intercom. Carol, clear my schedule for the rest of the week. And get me Richard Palmer from legal on the line. Hours later, Jackson sat across from Richard in the building's conference room, surrounded by property documents and employment contracts. Let me get this straight, Richard said, adjusting his glasses. You want to create a legitimate position for your ex-wife in one of our Queens properties? The Astoria Heights building needs a manager. Amelia has administrative experience from when she worked at the foundation. Jackson spread out the paperwork. I want everything above board. Market rate salary, full benefits, standard housing allowance. Richard studied him carefully. This isn't like you, Jackson. Since when do you handle residential staffing issues? Since now. Jackson's tone left no room for argument. Draw up the contracts. Make them ironclad. I don't want anyone questioning her qualifications or claiming favoritism. As Richard gathered the documents, he paused. The board might have questions about this. The board can direct their questions to me. Jackson stood, signaling the end of the meeting. Have the paperwork on my desk by tomorrow morning. That evening, instead of heading to his penthouse, Jackson drove to Queens. He parked outside Amelia's building, debating whether to go up. His decision was made for him when he spotted her leaving the building, bundled against the cold. Going somewhere? he called, rolling down his window. Amelia jumped slightly, then relaxed when she recognized him. Just to the grocery store. I'm craving oranges. Let me drive you. She hesitated before walking to the passenger side. You're making this a habit. Good habits are hard to break. He pulled away from the curb. Have you thought about the job offer? I called LeBlanc earlier, she said quietly. Told them I couldn't come in tonight. Good. He navigated toward the local grocery store. And the position in Astoria? Jackson? She sighed. It's complicated. It doesn't have to be. He parked the car. The job is real. The salary is fair. The apartment comes with the position. Nothing complicated about it. Inside the store, Jackson watched as Amelia selected oranges with careful consideration. Without comment, he added other items to their cart. Prenatal vitamins, organic vegetables, lean proteins. I can't afford all that, she protested when she noticed. Consider it a signing bonus, he replied, adding a container of Rocky Road ice cream, her old favorite. At the checkout, Amelia's eyes widened at the total, but Jackson smoothly handed over his credit card before she could object. Back in her apartment, as they unpacked the groceries, Jackson noticed a small notebook on her counter filled with careful calculations, budget numbers that didn't add up, no matter how they were arranged. The job starts at $70,000 a year, he said casually, plus benefits. Standard office hours, no weekends. Amelia nearly dropped the orange she was holding. That's too much. It's market rate for a property manager overseeing a building that size. He met her eyes. I had legal verify everything. This isn't charity, Amelia. It's a legitimate position. She leaned against the counter, one hand resting on her belly. And what happens when the baby comes? 3 months paid maternity leave, flexible return schedule, on-site daycare facility. He stepped closer. I've thought of everything. Let me do this one thing right. Tears welled in her eyes. You're making it very hard to say no. Then don't. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and wiped a tear from her cheek. Take the job. Take care of yourself and your son. Let me help make things right. What about your girlfriend? We ended things this morning. His hand lingered near her face. Turns out we wanted very different things. Amelia's breath caught. Jackson, I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. Just let me help. The rest can wait. She was quiet for so long that Jackson feared he'd pushed too hard. Finally, she spoke. When would I start? Relief flooded through him. The apartment will be ready next week. You can start as soon as you're moved in. I'll need to give LeBlanc notice. No, you won't. Doctor's orders, remember? I'll have movers here whenever you're ready. Amelia nodded slowly. Okay. That single word, barely whispered, felt more significant than any business deal Jackson had ever closed. He wanted to hug her, to promise that everything would be different this time, but he held back. Trust, like the new life growing inside her, needed time and care to develop. Instead, he simply said, "Thank you." As he left her apartment that night, Jackson felt lighter than he had in years. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time since their divorce, it felt like they were both walking in the same direction. The morning of Amelia's move dawned crisp and clear. Jackson arrived early at her woodside apartment, supervising as the professional moving crew carefully packed her belongings. Each item they wrapped seemed to tell a story of the life she'd built without him. Modest furniture bought at secondhand stores, baby items collected piece by piece, small touches that made a sparse apartment feel like home. You don't have to stay, Amelia said, emerging from her bedroom in leggings and an oversized sweater that barely contained her growing belly. I'm sure you have more important things to do. Nothing more important than this, Jackson replied, watching as movers carefully wrapped her small Christmas tree. He noticed how she kept one hand protectively on her stomach, a gesture that had become familiar to him over the past week. The move to Astoria Heights took less than 2 hours. The new apartment, on the building's 3rd floor, was nearly 3 times the size of her old place. Floor-to-ceiling windows flooded the space with natural light, highlighting the hardwood floors and modern fixtures. This is too much, Amelia whispered, standing in the center of the living room. It's exactly what you deserve, Jackson countered. He guided her through the space. 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a kitchen with new appliances, and a small home office perfect for managing building operations. The 2nd bedroom had been freshly painted in soft greens and blues. I hope you don't mind, he said. I had them prepare it for the nursery. Amelia ran her hand along the wall, tears gathering in her eyes. You didn't have to do this. I wanted to. He hesitated before adding, there's something else. Leading her to the master bedroom, Jackson opened the walk-in closet. Inside, alongside her carefully hung clothes, were several new maternity outfits and a professional wardrobe suitable for her new position. Jackson, before you object, he interrupted, consider them work expenses. You'll need appropriate clothing for meetings with tenants and contractors. She touched one of the blazers, cut to accommodate her pregnancy. How did you know my size? I remembered. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. The movers finished arranging her furniture, though it barely filled the spacious rooms. Jackson noticed Amelia's expression as she surveyed the empty spaces. We can go furniture shopping, he offered. For whatever you need. I can't let you buy everything, she protested. Think of it as investing in my property manager's workspace. He smiled. The apartment should reflect its occupant's position. Later that afternoon, they sat in the new kitchen, sharing takeout from their old favorite Chinese restaurant. Amelia had kicked off her shoes, her feet slightly swollen from the day's activities. The building orientation is tomorrow at 9:00, Jackson said, passing her the container of orange chicken she'd been eyeing. I'll be there to introduce you to the staff. You don't have to do that either. I want them to know you have my full support. He watched as she absently rubbed her lower back. Are you in pain? Just tired. The baby's been active today. Without thinking, Jackson moved behind her chair and began massaging her shoulders. For a moment, she tensed, then gradually relaxed under his touch. Remember when you used to do this every night? She murmured. Before I became too busy for everything that mattered. His hand stilled. I'm sorry, Amelia, for all of it. She turned to face him, their proximity suddenly intimate. Why now, Jackson? What changed? I did. He met her gaze steadily. Seeing you at LeBlanc, it was like waking up from a 2-year dream, or nightmare. Everything I thought I wanted, the status, the power, the perfect society girlfriend, it all felt hollow. And what do you want now? A chance to make things right, not just with you, but with myself. He stepped back, giving her space. I'm not asking for forgiveness or reconciliation. I just want to be someone you can count on. Amelia's hand moved to her belly as the baby kicked. Without warning, she grabbed Jackson's hand and placed it where her son was moving. The sensation of tiny feet pressing against his palm left Jackson speechless. This wasn't his child, but in that moment, it didn't matter. What mattered was the trust in Amelia's gesture, the vulnerability in sharing this intimate moment. He likes you, she said softly. He usually only kicks this much when I play music. Smart kid. Jackson reluctantly withdrew his hand. Like his mother. The moment was interrupted by a knock at the door. The building's head maintenance supervisor, Frank Miller, stood outside with a welcome basket. Mrs. Martinez, the staff wanted to welcome you properly. The older man handed over a basket filled with practical items. Cleaning supplies, basic tools, spare keys, and building manuals. We're all looking forward to working with you. Amelia accepted the basket with genuine warmth. Thank you, Mr. Miller. Please call me Amelia. After Frank left, Jackson watched as Amelia began organizing the items, her natural efficiency already evident. She looked more relaxed than he'd seen her since their reunion, as if the weight of uncertainty was finally lifting. I should go, he said reluctantly. You need to rest before tomorrow. She walked him to the door. Jackson? He turned back. Thank you. Not just for the job or the apartment, but for being here today. I'll always be here, he promised. Whatever you need. As he drove home that night, Jackson realized something had shifted. The expensive penthouse he'd once seen as a symbol of success now felt empty compared to the warmth of Amelia's new apartment. His priorities were changing, realigning with values he'd forgotten he had. His phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca, something about their mutual friends questioning their breakup. He deleted it without reading further. The life he'd built after leaving Amelia was crumbling, but from its ruins, something more authentic was emerging. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, introducing Amelia to her staff, helping her settle into her role, maintaining professional boundaries while navigating their complex personal history. But for the first time in years, Jackson felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Astoria Heights as Jackson stood in the building's modern lobby. He adjusted his tie, chosen deliberately to be less imposing than his usual Wall Street attire, and watched as the staff gathered for Amelia's introduction. At precisely 8:55 a.m., Amelia emerged from the elevator. She wore one of the new blazers he'd provided, professionally tailored to accommodate her pregnancy while maintaining an air of authority. Her hair was swept into a neat chignon, and despite her obvious nervousness, she carried herself with natural grace. "Ready?" Jackson asked quietly as she approached. She nodded, squaring her shoulders. "As I'll ever be." Frank Miller had assembled the entire building staff, maintenance workers, security personnel, cleaning crew, and administrative assistants. Their curious glances darted between Jackson and Amelia, clearly wondering about the dynamic between the building's owner and their new manager. "Good morning, everyone," Jackson began, his voice carrying across the lobby. "I'd like to introduce Amelia Martinez, your new building manager. She brings valuable administrative experience and will be overseeing all day-to-day operations moving forward." Amelia stepped forward, her voice clear and steady. "Thank you for the warm welcome yesterday. I'm looking forward to working with each of you to maintain the high standards of Astoria Heights." The meeting proceeded smoothly, as Frank introduced each staff member. Jackson watched with pride as Amelia engaged with everyone, asking relevant questions and showing genuine interest in their roles. She was a natural leader, something he'd forgotten during their marriage when he'd been too focused on his own ambitions. After the introductions, Jackson accompanied Amelia to her ground floor office. The space had been completely renovated with a comfortable chair designed for pregnancy, a state-of-the-art computer system, and large windows overlooking the building's courtyard. "This is overwhelming," she admitted once they were alone. "You'll be excellent at this job," Jackson assured her. "You always had better people skills than I did." "That's not saying much," she teased, then caught herself, as if surprised by the moment of familiarity. Jackson smiled, accepting the jab. "Fair point. But I mean it, Amelia. This isn't just about giving you a job. You're genuinely qualified for this position." She settled into her chair, wincing slightly as she adjusted her position. "The baby's been restless all morning. I think he knows something's changing." Without thinking, Jackson moved behind her chair. "May I?" At her nod, he began gently massaging her shoulders, feeling the tension gradually release. The moment felt both familiar and new, like reading a favorite book years later and finding new meaning in the words. "I have my next ultrasound tomorrow," Amelia said suddenly. Would you like to come?" Jackson's hands stilled. "Are you sure? You were helpful last time," she said softly. "And it's nice not to go alone." "What time?" 10:30. "I'll clear my schedule." He resumed the massage, careful to keep his touch professional despite the intimacy of the moment. A knock at the door interrupted them. Frank entered with a stack of maintenance requests and tenant files. "Sorry to interrupt, but we have a few urgent matters to discuss. Mrs. Martinez." Jackson stepped back, straightening his jacket. "That's my cue to leave. You have my number if you need anything." As he walked to his car, his phone buzzed with a message from his executive assistant. "Board meeting at 2 p.m. Quarterly reviews to discuss." Jackson typed back, "Move it to next week. I have a prior commitment tomorrow morning." For the first time in his career, business would not be his priority. The board might question his decisions but watching Amelia take charge of her new role had confirmed what he already knew. Some things were worth more than profit margins and shareholder approval. That evening, as he sat in his penthouse reviewing reports, Jackson's phone lit up with a text from Amelia. "The maintenance team is amazing. Frank showed me everything I need to know. Thank you for believing in me." He smiled, typing back, "You're the one who deserves the credit. Get some rest. I'll pick you up at 10 tomorrow." Setting down his phone, Jackson walked to his floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the city. Somewhere out there, in a newly furnished apartment in Astoria, Amelia was starting a new chapter in her life. And maybe, just maybe, he was too. The quarterly reports lay forgotten on his desk as he thought about tomorrow's ultrasound. He wasn't the baby's father, but he was becoming something else. A friend, a support system, maybe even a mentor. The role was undefined, complicated by their history, but for the first time since their divorce, it felt right. His phone buzzed again. Another message from Amelia. "The baby's kicking again. I think he approves of the new office chair." Jackson smiled, remembering the feeling of those tiny kicks against his palm. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, in this moment, everything felt possible. The morning of the ultrasound appointment dawned with unexpected warmth for December. Jackson arrived at Astoria Heights at 10 a.m. sharp, finding Amelia already waiting in the lobby. She wore a soft burgundy sweater dress that made her pregnancy glow even more pronounced. "You're early," she said, accepting his help into the car. "So are you." He noticed she seemed nervous, her hands fidgeting with her purse strap. "Everything okay?" "Just anxious. Dr. Wilson mentioned wanting to check something from last time." She tried to keep her voice light, but Jackson caught the undertone of worry. The drive to the medical center was quiet, both lost in their own thoughts. Jackson had spent the night researching pregnancy complications, preparing himself for any questions Dr. Wilson might raise. The protectiveness he felt surprised him. This wasn't his child, yet he found himself deeply invested in both mother and baby's well-being. In the waiting room, Amelia's name was called almost immediately. "Doctor." Wilson greeted them with a warm smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "How are you feeling, Amelia? Any dizziness? Headaches?" "Some headaches," Amelia admitted, "and my feet are swelling more than usual." Dr. Wilson nodded, making notes. "Your blood pressure is still higher than I'd like. Have you been able to reduce your work stress?" "She's in a new position," Jackson interjected. "No more long hours on her feet." The doctor's expression softened. "Good. Now, let's take a look at this little one." As the ultrasound image appeared, Jackson instinctively reached for Amelia's hand. This time, she gripped back tightly. "The baby's size has improved," Dr. Wilson said, moving the wand carefully. "But I'm seeing something that concerns me." She pointed to the screen. "This is the umbilical cord. There's a slight abnormality in the blood flow." Amelia's hand tightened around Jackson's. "What does that mean?" "It means we need to monitor you more closely. I want to see you weekly now, and you need to be extremely careful about your blood pressure." Dr. Wilson turned to face them directly. "No stress, no heavy lifting, and I want you to start tracking the baby's movements daily." "Is he in danger?" Jackson asked, voicing the question Amelia seemed afraid to ask. "Not currently, but we need to be proactive. There's a possibility we might need to deliver early if the condition worsens." She handed Amelia some tissues to wipe off the gel. "I'm prescribing bed rest for the next week. Then we'll reassess." The drive back to Astoria Heights was heavy with unspoken fears. Jackson helped Amelia into her apartment, watching as she sank onto her couch, one hand protectively cradling her belly. "I can't take a week off," she said finally. "I just started the job." "Yes, you can." Jackson sat beside her. "Frank can handle things temporarily, and I'll have someone from corporate assist if needed. I can't keep depending on you like this." "Why not?" The words came out more forcefully than he intended. "Why is it so hard to accept help?" "Because the last time I depended on someone, he walked away." Amelia's voice broke. "You left, Jackson, and then Michael left when I told him I was pregnant. So excuse me if I'm a little wary of letting anyone in again." The silence that followed was deafening. Jackson absorbed the pain in her words, the fear behind them. "I'm not going anywhere," he said quietly. "Not this time." "You can't promise that." "Actually, I can." He turned to face her fully. "I've spent 2 years trying to fill the void you left with meaningless success and shallow relationships. Nothing worked. Seeing you again, it woke me up, Amelia. I'm not asking for forgiveness or a second chance. I'm just asking you to let me be here for you and your son." Tears slid down her cheeks. "I'm scared, Jackson. For him. For me." Without hesitation, he pulled her into his arms. She resisted for a moment before melting into his embrace, her tears soaking his shirt. "We'll get through this," he promised, stroking her hair. "And whatever happens, you're not alone anymore." They stayed like that until Amelia's tears subsided. The baby kicked, as if reminding them of his presence, and they both laughed softly. "First order of business," Jackson said, wiping her cheeks gently. "Getting you everything you need for bed rest. Books, streaming services, comfortable pillows. Jackson, non-negotiable." He smiled. "Consider it part of your employee healthcare package." Later that evening, after ensuring Amelia was comfortable and had everything she needed, Jackson made his way home. His phone was filled with missed calls from the office. But for once, they didn't seem important. What mattered was the tiny heartbeat he'd heard that morning, the woman who was learning to trust again, and the chance to finally become the man he should have been 2 years ago. A week into Amelia's bed rest, winter announced itself with a fierce nor'easter. Jackson stood at his office window, watching snow blanket Manhattan, his mind in Astoria where Amelia was confined to her apartment. His phone buzzed with a text from her. Building's heating system is acting up. Frank's working on it, but some tenants are getting anxious. Without hesitation, he grabbed his coat. On my way. The drive to Queens took twice as long in the storm. When he arrived at Astoria Heights, the lobby was filled with concerned residents. Frank met him at the entrance, looking harried. Main boilers struggling with the cold snap. Mr. Montero, we've got space heaters distributed to the elderly residents but get whatever parts you need, Jackson interrupted. Price isn't an issue. And call in extra maintenance staff if required. He took the elevator to Amelia's apartment, finding her wrapped in a blanket on her couch. Laptop balanced on her pregnancy pillow as she coordinated with residents via email. You should be resting, he chided gently. I am resting, she protested. Just helping manage the crisis from here. She shivered slightly, and Jackson immediately checked the temperature in her apartment. It's too cold in here. He pulled out his phone. I'm having you move to a hotel until… No. Her voice was firm. I'm not leaving while my tenants are dealing with this. Just, could you build a fire? Jackson moved to the fireplace, a feature he'd insisted on when renovating the apartment. Soon, warmth began spreading through the room. Amelia's color improved as the temperature rose. How are you feeling? He asked, settling beside her on the couch. The baby's active today. She smiled. Dr. Wilson says that's a good sign. My blood pressure was better at yesterday's appointment too. Jackson felt relief flood through him. The past week had been tense, with both of them worried about the umbilical cord issues. He'd thrown himself into researching specialists, making contingency plans for early delivery if needed. Have you thought about names? He asked, surprising himself with the question. Amelia was quiet for a moment. Lucas, she finally said. It means light-giving. Lucas, Jackson repeated softly. It's perfect. Their eyes met, and something shifted in the air between them. Amelia broke the contact first, looking down at her hands. Jackson, we need to talk about this. She gestured between them. Whatever this is becoming. Before he could respond, his phone rang. Frank with updates about the heating system. By the time he finished the call, the moment had passed. They need parts from New Jersey, he explained. The storm's delaying delivery. The residents in 4B have a newborn, Amelia worried, and Mrs. Chen in 2A is recovering from pneumonia. Jackson made a decision. Pack a bag. You're coming to my penthouse until this is fixed. Jackson, the whole building needs to be evacuated until the heating's restored. I'm arranging hotel rooms for everyone. But you, he met her eyes, you need proper monitoring and warmth. My place has backup generators and a live-in housekeeper who can help if needed. She started to protest, then winced, pressing a hand to her side. What's wrong? Jackson was instantly alert. Just Braxton Hicks contractions. Dr. Wilson said they're normal, but they're stronger in the cold. That settled it. Jackson began packing her essentials while calling his housekeeper to prepare the guest room. Within an hour, they were in his Upper East Side penthouse. Amelia settled in a warm room with a view of the snow-covered park. This is temporary, she insisted as he brought her tea, just until the building's fixed. Of course, he agreed, though part of him wished it wasn't. Having her here, safe and warm, felt right in a way his luxury apartment never had before. That night, unable to sleep, Jackson found Amelia in his kitchen, making hot chocolate. Couldn't sleep? He asked, joining her at the counter. Lucas is doing somersaults. She smiled. Want to feel? He placed his hand on her belly, marveling at the strong movements. He's going to be a fighter, like his mother. There was a hint of their old teasing tone in her voice. Exactly like his mother. Jackson kept his hand there, feeling the baby's movements gradually calm. Amelia, about what you wanted to discuss earlier. She tensed slightly. It's late, Jackson. We should both get some sleep. But as she passed him on her way back to the guest room, she squeezed his hand briefly. That small gesture carried more hope than any words could have expressed. The storm raged outside but inside the penthouse, something warm and fragile was growing, like a flower pushing through winter soil, determined to bloom despite the cold. 3 days into the storm, Jackson's penthouse had transformed from its usual pristine solitude into something warmer, more lived in. Amelia's pregnancy books were scattered across the coffee table. Her special tea occupied a corner of the kitchen counter, and the sound of her soft humming often drifted through the rooms. The heating at Astoria Heights was still being repaired, delayed by the persistent weather. Jackson sat at his home office desk, coordinating with contractors while watching snow continue to fall outside his window. "You're going to wear out your phone," Amelia commented from the doorway. She wore one of his oversized sweaters over her leggings, looking more at home than any of his previous girlfriends ever had. "Frank says they finally got the parts," he replied, setting down his phone. "But installation will take another day at least." She waddled, there was no other word for it now, to the leather armchair across from his desk. "The residents are well taken care of at the hotel. You need to stop worrying. That's rich, coming from the woman who spent yesterday reorganizing the building's maintenance schedules from bed rest." She smiled, acknowledging the hit. "Lucas likes when I stay busy. Speaking of which," she pressed a hand to her side, "he's particularly active this morning." Jackson moved around the desk without hesitation, kneeling beside her chair to feel the now familiar movements. These moments had become natural between them, the physical boundary between ex-spouses blurring into something undefined but comfortable. "Have you heard from Michael?" he asked quietly, the question he'd been avoiding for weeks finally surfacing. Amelia stiffened slightly. "No, and I don't want to. He should know about the complications." "Why?" Her voice was sharp. "So he can disappear again? He made his choice. Jackson, just like—" She stopped abruptly. "Just like I did," he finished. "Except I came back." Their eyes met, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. The baby kicked again, breaking the tension. "I have another ultrasound tomorrow," Amelia said, changing the subject. "Dr. Wilson wants to check the blood flow again. I'll drive you. You have that board meeting. It can wait." He stood, helping her up from the chair. "Though some things are more important." Later that evening, they sat in his living room, the fireplace casting warm shadows across the walls. Amelia was attempting to knit what was supposed to be a baby blanket, though it looked more like an abstract art piece. "You're terrible at that," Jackson observed, amused. "I'd like to see you do better." She threw a ball of yarn at him, which he caught easily. "I prefer my talents in other areas, like making obscene amounts of money, like taking care of the people who matter." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Amelia set down her knitting, looking at him seriously. "Why are you really doing all this, Jackson? The job, the apartment, taking care of me during this storm. What changed?" He was quiet for a long moment, gathering his thoughts. "When I saw you at LeBlanc that night, it was like seeing myself clearly for the first time in years. All the success, the status, the perfect image I'd built, it meant nothing compared to watching you struggle alone, pregnant and working on your feet because of choices I made. You're not responsible for Michael leaving." "No, but I set the pattern." He moved to sit beside her on the couch. "I showed you that the men you trust will choose ambition over love. I broke that trust first." Amelia's eyes filled with tears. "Jackson, I'm not trying to win you back," he continued quickly. "I just want to be someone you can count on. Someone Lucas can count on. If you'll let me." She reached for his hand, intertwining their fingers. "You already are." The moment was interrupted by a sharp intake of breath from Amelia. "What's wrong?" Jackson asked, instantly alert. "Nothing, just another Braxton Hicks," but her face showed more discomfort than usual. "We're calling Dr. Wilson. It's late now, Amelia." 20 minutes later, they were heading to the hospital through the snowy streets, Jackson's heart pounding with a fear he hadn't felt since the day she'd left him. This time, though, he wouldn't let her face anything alone. The night stretched ahead of them, full of uncertainty, but one thing was clear. Whatever happened, they would face it together. The emergency room lights cast harsh shadows as Jackson paced the waiting area. Dr. Wilson had immediately admitted Amelia after detecting elevated blood pressure and concerning patterns in the baby's heart rate. "Mr. Montero," a nurse appeared. "You can come in now." He found Amelia in a private room, hooked up to various monitors. The steady beeping of the fetal heart monitor provided a reassuring rhythm in the otherwise quiet space. "The contractions are real this time," Amelia said, trying to smile despite her obvious fear. 32 weeks is too early." Jackson took her hand, noting how cold her fingers felt. "Dr. Wilson is the best. She'll know what to do." As if summoned, the doctor entered, her face serious but composed. "The good news is we've stopped the contractions for now. The bad news is I'm putting you on strict hospital bed rest until delivery. The umbilical cord issues we've been monitoring have worsened, and your blood pressure is dangerously high." "How long?" Amelia asked, her voice trembling. Ideally, we'd like to get you to 36 weeks, but we'll monitor day by day. Dr. Wilson checked the monitors. The next 48 hours are critical. After the doctor left, Jackson pulled a chair close to Amelia's bed. I'll have Carol bring some things from the penthouse. You don't have to stay, Amelia protested weakly. The board meeting can wait. He squeezed her hand. I'm not leaving you alone this time. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I'm scared, Jackson. What if something happens to him? Hey, he lifted her chin gently. Lucas is strong, like his mother. We'll get through this together. Through the night, Jackson maintained his vigil as Amelia drifted in and out of sleep. Every time she woke, he was there, adjusting her pillows, getting ice chips, or simply holding her hand. Around dawn, she stirred. Tell me a story, she whispered. Something to keep my mind off the monitors. Jackson thought for a moment. Remember our first apartment? That tiny studio in Brooklyn, with the leaky faucet you tried to fix? And flooded the entire bathroom. He smiled at the memory. But we were happy there. We were. Amelia's voice was soft. Before the deals and the promotions became more important than us. I was an idiot. He traced patterns on her palm. I thought I was building a better life for us, but I lost sight of what really mattered. And now I know that success means nothing without someone to share it with. He met her eyes. Someone who sees past the wealth to the person underneath. The morning sun began filtering through the hospital windows as they talked, sharing memories and regrets, hopes and fears. When Dr. Wilson came for morning rounds, she found them both asleep, Jackson in the uncomfortable chair, still holding Amelia's hand. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of tests, medications, and constant monitoring. Jackson left only briefly to shower and change, returning with healthy snacks and Amelia's favorite books. On the third morning, Dr. Wilson arrived with good news. The medications are working, your blood pressure is stabilizing, and the baby's readings are improving. Relief flooded through both of them. Amelia pressed her free hand to her belly, feeling Lucas move. So we can make it to 36 weeks? That's the goal. But you're not leaving this hospital until delivery. The doctor looked at Jackson. And you need actual sleep in an actual bed. I'm fine, he protested. You're no good to either of them. Exhausted? Dr. Wilson said firmly. Later that evening, as Jackson prepared to leave for his first real night's sleep in days, Amelia caught his hand. Thank you, she said simply, for being here, for being the man I always knew you could be. He leaned down, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. Get some rest. I'll be back first thing tomorrow. As he drove home through the city lights, Jackson realized something fundamental had changed during those critical hours. The wall between them, built of pride and past hurts, had begun to crumble. Whether they found their way back to each other romantically or not, they would never truly be apart again. Lucas had created a permanent bridge between them, and Jackson was determined to be worthy of crossing it. The hospital room had become their world over the past 2 weeks. Jackson had transformed the sterile space into something more comfortable. Fresh flowers appeared daily, family photos lined the windowsill, and a small Bluetooth speaker played the classical music that seemed to calm both Amelia and Lucas. 34 weeks, Amelia announced that morning, marking another day off her calendar. We're getting closer. Jackson looked up from his laptop, where he'd been working remotely. He'd moved his entire office operation to the hospital room, refusing to be far from Amelia despite her protests. Blood pressure? He asked, already moving to check the monitor. Stable, she smiled. Dr. Wilson says we might actually make it to 36 weeks. The relief in her voice was palpable. Each day they kept Lucas inside was a victory, giving him more time to grow stronger. Jackson had researched everything about premature babies, preparing himself for every possibility. I had an interesting visitor this morning while you were in your meeting, Amelia said carefully. Jackson set aside his laptop. Oh, Rebecca came by. The air in the room suddenly felt thicker. What did she want? To apologize, actually. Amelia adjusted her position, wincing slightly. She said she understood now, seeing us together, why things didn't work between you two. Jackson moved to help her find a more comfortable position. And what did you say? That sometimes life gives us second chances when we least expect them. She caught his hand as he withdrew. We need to talk about what happens after Lucas arrives. Amelia, let me finish. She took a deep breath. These past weeks Having you here, it's shown me a different side of you, the man I always knew you could be. Jackson sat on the edge of her bed, still holding her hand. I meant what I said before. I'm not expecting anything. I just want to be here for both of you. What if I want more? Her voice was barely a whisper. Before he could respond, the monitors started beeping rapidly. Amelia's face contorted in pain. Something's wrong, she gasped. Jackson hit the emergency button as Dr. Wilson rushed in, quickly assessing the situation. The baby's in distress, she announced. We need to do an emergency C-section. Now. Everything moved in a blur after that. Jackson found himself being rushed into surgical scrubs, his heart pounding as they wheeled Amelia into the operating room. Don't leave me, she pleaded, gripping his hand. Never again, he promised, and this time they both knew he meant it. The next 30 minutes were the longest of Jackson's life. Then, suddenly, a cry pierced the air, strong and defiant. He's here, Dr. Wilson announced. Small, but fighting. Lucas James Martinez entered the world at 4:37 p.m., weighing 5 pounds 3 ounces. As the nurses cleaned him up, Jackson looked down at Amelia's tear-streaked face. He's beautiful, he whispered. I just like his mother. When they placed Lucas in Amelia's arms, Jackson felt his world shift on its axis. This tiny being, though not his by blood, had already claimed a piece of his heart. We're going to need to monitor him in the NICU for a few days, Dr. Wilson explained, but his vitals are strong for 34 weeks. Later that night, as Amelia slept and Lucas rested safely in the NICU, Jackson stood at the nursery window. He watched the rise and fall of the tiny chest, the determined grip of those miniature fingers. I promise, he whispered to the glass, I'll spend the rest of my life being worthy of both of you. Behind him, in the quiet hospital corridor, a new chapter was beginning, one of healing, hope, and second chances. 1 month after Lucas's birth, Amelia was finally preparing to leave the hospital. The NICU doctors had given their approval for discharge, impressed by the baby's progress. Though still small, Lucas had proven to be a fighter, gaining weight steadily and showing remarkable strength. Ready to go home? Jackson asked, carefully placing Lucas in his car seat. The baby blinked up at him with eyes that seemed too wise for his tiny face. Home, Amelia repeated softly. The apartment feels like a lifetime ago. During her hospital stay, Jackson had quietly arranged for the nursery to be fully equipped. What he hadn't told her was how many nights he'd spent there himself, unable to sleep in his penthouse, knowing they were in the hospital. Actually, he said, helping her into the wheelchair hospital policy required, I was hoping we could talk about that. The drive to Astoria Heights was quiet, Lucas sleeping peacefully in his car seat. When they arrived, Jackson insisted on carrying both baby and bags, following Amelia to her apartment. The moment she opened the door, she gasped. The space had been transformed. Soft lighting illuminated new furniture, carefully chosen to create a warm, nurturing environment. The nursery, visible through the open door, was a masterpiece of gentle colors and thoughtful details. Jackson, Amelia turned to him, tears in her eyes. Before you say anything, he set the car seat down gently. I have a proposition. Another one. But she was smiling. Marry me. Again. The words hung in the air between them. Lucas stirred in his sleep, making tiny snuffling sounds. Jackson, we can't just... We can. He took her hands in his. These past weeks have shown me what really matters. Not the deals or the board meetings or the society parties. This, you and Lucas, this is what I want my life to be about. We're different people now, Amelia said softly. Better people. He touched her cheek gently. I'm not the same man who chose ambition over love. You're not the same woman who felt she had to leave. We've grown, separately and together. And Lucas, I already love him as my own. Let me be his father in every way that matters. Amelia looked at their sleeping son, then back at Jackson. We'll need to take it slow. We have all the time in the world. He pulled her close, careful not to disturb the baby. Is that a yes? Instead of answering, she kissed him, their first real kiss since before their divorce. It felt like coming home and starting a new adventure all at once. Lucas chose that moment to wake up, demanding attention with a cry that seemed impossibly loud for such a tiny being. They broke apart laughing. I think that's his way of approving, Jackson said, moving to lift the baby. Watching him cradle their son, because that's what Lucas had become, theirs. Amelia felt the last pieces of her heart heal, Yes, she said simply. Yes to everything. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm, but inside this apartment, a new family was being born, one built on second chances, hard-earned wisdom, and love that had survived its greatest test. The future stretched before them, full of promise and possibility. This time, they would write their story together, with Lucas as their greatest collaboration. If you were in Amelia's position, would you give a second chance to an ex-husband who abandoned everything for ambition, but returned showing true change after finding you pregnant with another man's child? Leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below, letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.